Got it.
Success.
Yeah,
All right. Well, hey, Scott, I appreciate you giving a little bit of time today, man, for a chat.
you're welcome. I'm very happy to be here.
I see the ceiling fan going in the background. Is it as hot where you are as it is here? We're burning here in Washington State.
So I'm in the Central Valley in California, which I'm just north of Modesto, about an hour and a half east of San Francisco, and it's been hot. It's been in triple digits, which isn't unusual for the summertime, but we've been pushing like 109, 110. It's hot. I have got air conditioning, so I'm thankful, but um it's dry heat, so I'm also thankful there's no humidity, but it's hot.
So there's something to that. It's a dry heat thing that actually is.
There is. Yeah, I mean, in the shade, you can feel that it's warm, but it's not humid, so you're not just wet all the time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So it cuts some of the heat when you're in the shade. You can be out on your patio. And if there's a little bit of a breeze, you can actually jump in your pool, get out, and have the wind cool you off. So there are ways around it. I'm thankful my house has air conditioning. It helps.
Is that hit or miss in your area, folks with air conditioning versus not?
It's kind of a requirement out here.
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the places out here have AC. There are some older homes in different towns and stuff that don't, or maybe out on a farm and country and that kind of thing. But it's a necessary expense out here for sure.
They got something going on, a box
Right.
fan. There's something happening. I mean, if it's north of 100, that is miserable. Are you dealing with any good old California like rolling blackouts due to, energy usage and eight people run their ACs and all that stuff?
Um, Thankfully, my electricity, and I'm not shaming PG&E, but I'm not on PG&E.
Okay.
I'm on MID, and so they're actually really dependable.
Okay, that's cool.
I was at work the other day, working in the lab, and the power went out. They're on PG&E, so it was kind of like, oh, yeah, that was kind of a
Gotcha.
surprise.
Gotcha. Oh man, that would be miserable. I've got a buddy who is living in Reno, Nevada.
Right.
He's been there about 6 years, and it's currently the hottest that it's ever been. And he told me like funny story. Like a week ago, he saw some like coupon or something for like an HVAC specialist to come out and like do a check, like just make sure everything's cool. So he took advantage of it, and they found something with like, your voltage is a bit low. And he's like, everything's running fine. Like, don't try to get more money out. Like, "No, okay, thanks," but it sent him away. And his AC broke yesterday, and as like his family's roasting, he's like, "Man, I don't know if that was bad timing, if
Right.
they jinxed my system or something." But I think the whole this side of the country, man, is getting scorched. I did that, just finished that workout, and I was pouring sweat, that back squat burpee deal.
Yep, I did it this morning, but it was still about 85 and just getting warmer. And of course, you're in the garage. I don't have an air conditioner in my garage, just a box fan. And you really want to start sweating, do some static holds like an L sit, man. I'll tell you, the sweat just starts pouring.
Isn't it amazing how long 12 seconds can be for
It's a
that
long
else?
time. It's a long time.
There's so like it's things like that that I don't know whether to have a good, like, I could be optimistic or pessimistic, and maybe it's optimistic because there's always something to work on. And I guess that's a good thing. But then you also think, for as long as I've been doing this, 12 seconds in an else, it should not feel that hard.
Right. It's still hard, particularly as you go down the ladder too, because you're back at it sooner. You don't get the break, and
Yes, sir.
not that not that burpees are a break for
At least the
athletes.
numbers go down.
Yeah, burpees. I got a long way to go, man. I'm like 6 foot 1 inch. It's just there's more distance to move. It's not
Yeah,
my
I'd say you're blessed with height. I'm not. I'm just 5'8", and I don't like burpees at 5'8". If north of 6 feet, I would think that would be a miserable experience. And and talking about things that I've been doing for a long time and are still challenging, based upon some of the info you gave me before we even started chatting, I didn't realize you've been at this quite a while. I
yeah.
mean, you said CrossFit since 2013. What put your foot in the door, or kind of, alerted you to CrossFit way back then? Because that was a bit ago.
It was a bit ago. My wife actually kind of picked up on it through a group of friends, something like that. And she's like, "You got to come check this out." And I was like, "I don't know, man. I was full-time runner, right?" And I'm like, "I'll give this a try, dude, but I
When
can
you say
run."
runner,
Yep.
that can be anything from, you jog around the neighborhood each night to you like to do some distance. What was your running?
It was running for stuff like half marathons, stuff like that. So,
Okay.
which is not all that crazy, but
Good
um,
run.
running, I can run because I'm taller, so I've got a larger gait. And so it was like my mile times would be like high sixes, low sevens,
Nice.
which,
Sustained, you mean for like a
yeah,
half marathon? Oh,
exactly.
wow. That's impressive.
It's moving. But at the time, so I was like, oh, yeah, I'm super fit. I got this. No problem. Come in, go to a CrossFit class and that kind of thing, and just got trampled. We were doing thrusters, and it was like at 95 pounds, and I'm not a big guy, so I'm 6'1". At the time I was a runner and I was like 170,
Mm-hmm.
175 maybe, so tall and lean, right? So 95 pounds it just crushed me. It was,
That's a significant loading.
yeah, it was something like 21:15:9, not like Fran, but there were thrusters involved. Maybe it was Fran. I don't remember. It was before I started really logging
Blocked it out of your memory.
what I was doing, and it just crushed me. And then, later on that year, we did Murph on the 4th of July. And so I was up in the 50 range, no vest, but we did it unpartitioned.
Mm.
And that was the business for sure. It was rough. I was sore for a few days after.
And I mean, are you the sort of personality? Because there's a couple types of people, right? There's something like that that delivers such a slice of humble pie that some people don't want to admit that it exists and will go back to what they're quite good at. And there are some people who are like, well, that knocked me on my butt. I'm intrigued. What kept you going back?
Usually it's like what I tell people when they ask me, like, what do you do CrossFit for? And it scratches a certain itch for me, if that
Mm,
makes sense, that I couldn't get otherwise. I realized, having been in a CrossFit class, I'm like, obviously I'm missing other pieces of a fitness avenue. Like, my upper body strength isn't there. My ability to squat and go below parallel is not there. I can run, sure,
right.
big deal, but obviously there's more to this than that. And so I'm like a lot of the members of the community, I like to work on the grit between the ears. And like I said, CrossFit scratches that itch, and it's not the same thing all the time. I think probably for me, I know a lot of people love the barbell and the heavy days. Those actually aren't my favorites.
Good for you. I like to hear the other voices.
Yeah. So I'm more like, the long and the light. That's sort of where I make my hay. So if I have to pick, it's
The
Murph.
grinders.
It's Test 13, which was a long
Mm,
time ago, didn't have a name. It was just
right.
a
Yeah.
workout that we didn't speak of.
Which
Um,
is coming back up again, by the way. We're going to circle back to that, I think, in September.
yeah, it is. And it used to, I mean, back in the day, I think it had a 60-minute time cap. And I was thankful to get capped out because I was like, cool.
Oh, I made it more accessible, extended. I think we pushed it up to a 90-minute time cap.
Right now, there's nowhere to hide. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're gonna get it done. Yeah, I'm one of those odd CrossFitters as well. I'm nowhere near the running prowess that you do, and I couldn't hold those times to that distance, but I always just liked running. It had
right.
something that I enjoyed. I was forced to do it for certain parts of my life and did it voluntarily for a lot of my life, but there's something about running I personally think that I don't find with the barbell. I don't find with something else like a disconnectedness if I can just take off on a run and truly take off that I don't know. There's something unique to running. I enjoy
Yeah,
it very much.
absolutely. Truth be told, I mean, over the years, because fitness is a journey. I think like when I was a runner, I was lighter than I am now. I'm more up around 180, 185, just depending on what I'm wearing and what scale I'm on and that kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
So I've given up time on the run for
Hmm.
for the gain in muscle and that kind of thing. And I'm okay with that. Like I can
That's
still,
that balance, a trade-off.
yeah, and it's a trade-off, adding 10 extra pounds, you can feel it when you run. And I can't keep the cadence of a 5K, at 19 minutes or something like that anymore. It's too hard. And at that speed, I found like my gait just it changes, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
sustainable for me for the long haul. And so I'm happy to give up 30 seconds for a little more ability to move my weight around and pick up some more weight on the barbell and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure compared to the greater CrossFit population, most people would look at you and still be like, you're a very talented runner. You know,
Only
but
when we're running.
when you look back, it's all relative. I look back at some of the times that I used to be able to do, and they're like science fiction now. But that's all I was doing. I had no deadlift to speak of. I had no back squat. I had nothing else. Like I was just like a calisthenics and running person, period. End of story. And so I was very just two-dimensional. And I gained a ton of other capacity in those other areas, but I had to give up a little bit over there. And it was a trade-off that was well worth it. But I still know what those old times were. I'm like, ah,
Yeah, the ego's still there.
yeah, it's still there. So you started working out 2013 in a gym?
Yeah, so we had a CrossFit that I would drop into here in town. And then for me at the time with my work schedule, and I had my kids were younger at that point, so that was 10 years ago. So my kids were let's see, 5 and 8.
Mm,
Sometimes I'd bring them with me, but they get squirrely and they get bored and you got to work. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna build a home gym, right? And this was back when Rogue would do that insane 5 items ships for $5, and it would only come around on Black Friday. Right now, it's like the entire month of November. But
right.
so I would like calculate, all right, I'm gonna order like 600 pounds worth of gear, and Rick and Rogue would be shipping it to me for $5. And I was like, that's insane.
That's
Um,
awesome. So you started building out the home gym before it was cool, quite
well,
frankly, because
yeah,
everyone got
frankly, it
into that
was
around pandemic time, but you were well ahead of that power curve.
I was, and it wasn't overnight.
Yeah,
It was like this year I'm going to do this. I started out with a squat stand, and a bar, an Ohio bar, and a package of plates, right? And then over the years, it's just kind of, I added a sandbag, then I added a strongman sandbag, then I added some kettlebells, and then I
yep.
added, some dumbbells, and so on and so forth, and a rower and an echo bike, and
Sure. Yeah, of course. Okay. Of course. But you know what's funny? And don't get me wrong, I've been building my garage gym for years and years too, and it was a slow accumulation. And it's wonderful. You can have the stuff, it's wonderful. But man, if you know what you're doing, right? If you got some knowledge between the years, if you tomorrow walked into your garage and they're like, hey, you got to make it work for the next year, and you've got your barbell, bunch of bumper plates, a set of squat stands, and a pull-up bar, and that's it. You'd be like, oh, all right, you
yep,
can get a lot done with that, you know?
not done.
You know,
Absolutely.
it doesn't as long as you got some strength and conditioning IQ to go with that gear, because somebody else could look at that gear and be like, man, what am I going to do with this? And for somebody else, it's like, limitless. I'm not going to run out of stuff to do for forever here. Yeah, and is your home gym quote unquote finished?
I think it's finished. I
Okay.
I mean, I've been at it for over 10 years, and so it's finished. There's no major pieces of equipment, and I've made some, substitutions, had to make it work. Like I've got a rope that hangs on a tree in our backyard. It's not
That's
15
cool.
feet.
Right.
And
That's
for the
cool though.
longest time, that used to bug me, right? Because it was like, it's not all right. It's not 15 feet, right? And you just kind of like,
Yep.
what? Who cares?
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you. You're still, how old are you?
I'm gonna be turning 47 in November.
47, you're climbing a rope.
Right. My
Like, I mean,
neighbors think I'm nuts.
you're literally like in Delta Force compared to regular people like walking around. I mean, that's not what people north of 40 do. You know what I
No,
mean? Lift weights and climb ropes. I mean, so that's who cares? Like I said, who cares that it's not 15 feet? That's awesome.
right.
So you're attending this gym, and what made you, so was it the hecticness and kids and stuff like that that made you eventually start to become a garage gym athlete?
Yeah, it was the convenience of being able to, you want to go to the gym, it's right through that door, you
And
know.
what was, it's a big fitness world out there, right? I mean, it's hundreds of millions of people working out, out of the billions of people in the world. And there's going to be hundreds of millions that just powerlift, just Olympic, light CrossFit, hey CrossFit, just run, want to work out in a gym, want to work out at home. Like there's everything, like was that transition from being in a class to now you've got to have the internal drive to walk into the garage on your own? Was that difficult for you or no big deal? You're just that's the sort of thing you are as a person. It's not an issue.
Um, I think for me as a person, um, the discipline is there. And then once it gets into be like a habit,
Mm,
it becomes one of those things like I need to work out on a regular basis or else I'm not as good a person as I can be at home. And so
understood.
for me, it was like I know a lot of people work out before work. Majority of my career has been after work.
Mm,
Being in healthcare for a long time, it was just a sort of a stress release, some place to go and just get some of that out, right? So that you're not taking it out on the wife and kids and that kind of thing.
hmm.
Very easily go that route too.
Out of curiosity, you did mention your profession there. What was it in the healthcare that you did? You mentioned earlier, I think you said the lab, which most people don't use that terminology as well. So what was the healthcare?
So the healthcare, and when I say the lab, it's still healthcare. It's the official title out here in the States is called a clinical laboratory scientist. Sometimes they're called medical laboratory scientists across the states. The interesting thing, and not to run down a rabbit hole here, is it's not a very well-known niche. And what we do is you go into the hospital, your blood gets drawn, or they take some kind of biopsy sample, something from you. It goes to the lab, right?
Hmm.
And in the lab, you have scientists that are in there that run tests on whatever based on what the physician has ordered. And then we relay that information to the physician and then tell them, like, hey, it's this, hey, it's high glucose, hey, it's that, whatever. Requires a license through the Department of Public Health, just like a nurse. There's a board exam that you take, just like a nurse, but you're part of the medical diagnostics team
Okay.
inside the hospital, which is like lab, imaging, and pharmacy, right?
Hmm.
And I don't know, whenever you go to the hospital, the people on the front line, the nurses and the doctors aren't really making decisions without that information anymore.
Sure. Makes sense.
So we're kind of in the background. It's nerdy, like there's a lot of science there, but the interesting thing about this linchpin group, we're not all that common from a profession standpoint, but there's at least 4 or 5 of us in this group, which is
Is
fun.
that right?
Yeah, because like every now and then, somebody on the Facebook
Yes.
group will throw out, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" Right? And and it's
Yep.
blah blah blah, and like I'll read through, and it's like, huh, that's
That's
wild.
hysterical.
Because I know one person, and he's a prominent member, Nicholas in Canada. He's like a CEO.
Yes, Nicholas M. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. He does the same thing, except for it's in Canada, but it's the
Okay.
same kind of thing. And the last time we threw it out, there were a few people on the East and West Coast, and I had jumped jobs and jumped out of healthcare for a little bit because I needed a break. Now I'm back at it, got sucked back in because the lab world's a small world. And so it can be as stressful as you want it to be. You can work for a trauma center. Right now, it's a little more relaxing. I'm doing something for a private practice, and so it's nowhere near as stressful. Nobody's going
What
crazy
does
for
what
information.
does the stress come from? And pardon my ignorance, right? Because like you said, I would think one of the interesting things that maybe as a pro is if it's a bit more back room, not in the actual front office, crazy people yelling in the OR or whatnot. I would think your work comes in, you got to get your work done. When your work's done, you send it back out. But obviously there's a lot more going on to it than that. So where does the stress come from that was just
So
you
in a
need a break from?
Yeah, in a trauma center, the stress comes from that you're working with trauma services, the OR, the ER, and part of what we do in the laboratory is transfusion service. So when you're getting blood or when you
Hmm.
need blood, there's a process that is going on that makes sure that's compatible and safe for whoever it is
Okay.
you're putting it into. And so there's processes in place, documents that need to be in place. It's highly
Stuff
regulated.
you don't want to mess up.
Well, I'm not worried so much about messing up. It's just when somebody's on the table bleeding, they need what I'm trying to provide 5 minutes ago.
Mm,
But I can't just give it to you without, like, you can't just walk in and I'll be like, here you go, here's some
right,
random
right.
blood, have fun. There's a process there. And so that's where the rub is. It's the same yelling and stress. I need this now. Where is this?
Gotcha.
But you're just doing it either over the phone or over a PA system or somebody's running into the lab waiting and that the clock's ticking, right?
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, I could see how that would wear a human being down.
Right. And then you add in, working through the middle of the night and over the weekend, over a holiday like the 4th of July, and people are just out there being crazy.
It's so interesting to hear different people's stories and what what made you go back to it?
Um, so the place I was at when I sent this email to you, I was working for a winery, right? I was just doing a data analysis. I mean, data is data, so that's up my alley. And there was a career path there. It was just going to take another 8 to 10 years to get there.
Mm,
This opportunity came along. The pay was really good, and it was like it's in private practice, and so it was like I can work less and make more.
that's a nice ratio.
And so I can be at home more and as I'm getting towards the tail end of my career, it's, working that 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. It's a grind,
Hmm.
and my kids are getting older. I've got a daughter who's going to turn 19. My son's going to turn 16. We got a couple of foster kids in the house. So there's chaos at home that my wife needs help with, and I'm trying to be present.
Well, if you figure out how to be present, let me know. I'm
It's not easy.
still working on that myself. Yeah, I could go down a rabbit hole on that, but yeah, that's an area I need to improve on. So that hits home. And you brought up something that actually, out of all the stuff that, you know, you mentioned, I was the most interested to talk to, and that was the foster aspect that you've currently have foster kids in the home, and you said over the course of the years, there's been stretches where you have some, stretches where you don't. Just walk me through that. I'm so fascinated by that on so many levels. I mean, raising your own kids is both joyous and at the same time torturous. Like they both are intertwined. There's this, it's great. It's great. And it's also profoundly hard. And then to be like, on top of that, I'm gonna do this for other kids as well. Like I see it as being the people who do that almost like angels, like honestly, like special people, the people who would open up their homes to these other kids that I'm going to make bold assumptions, which is why I'm so curious to hear your take on it. But I assume if they're in need of foster care, something good didn't happen. And so there's something coming through the door with them, and again, raising regular kids is tough enough. And then if you develop how long these kids are with you, you might develop serious bonds to them and then they leave. Like seems like it would be gut wrenching. So just what I've never talked to anyone who's had foster kids. So just what's that experience like? How did it start?
So when my wife and I got married, we've been married for 24 years. It's actually our anniversary today, but yeah,
Anniversary.
yeah,
Just what a way to spend it with me.
that's right. Well, as you move along in anniversaries, we're
Right,
kind of one
right,
of those
right.
couples, like you hit a certain time and you're like you want to celebrate the milestones, right?
Yeah.
So now I've got a year to plan for year 25.
Hmm.
We need to go somewhere. We need to do something special.
Great.
But when we got married, my wife always she came from a family of four, and so I was like, no, I'm good with two kids. Like my quiver is full at that point.
Hmm.
Good. And of course with some nudging and prodding and she's like, no, but we can do this and we've got room and fast forward. And so we kind of you go through a process to get certified as a foster parent.
Makes sense.
And our goal was, and you always got to get certified because you're handling wards of the state, right? So the state is giving you these kids that they have ownership of, and so the standards are like way up here to be a foster care parent, whereas to just have your own kids, it's like it's
Right.
way down there.
Right.
Um,
Just
anyhow, the goal for us was always foster with the intent to adopt. So
okay.
that puts us in a different category because it's not just random, like, hey, you need to manage these kids for 2 weeks and then they're going to go back to a relative or whatever. It's a long-term placement with the intent to adopt. And so we've had a few kids here and there and it just didn't work, right? Just wasn't a good fit, and that happens. And we had the ones before the ones we had now, they were young. So my kids were, in teens, and they were like a 1 year old and a 3 year old.
Oh, wow.
Talk
Wow.
about like being reset all of a sudden. It was
Yeah.
like, whoa. And so that was rough. Ultimately, with one out of the two, it just wasn't a good fit with where we were going to head. There was just too much chaos and personality conflicts. And so we had to give them back. The two that we have now are 13 and 11. Um, and they're good boys, but they're boys, as you know. And it's like there's just chaos and they just need wrangling and it's like
Housing and horseplay.
yeah, there's socks everywhere and
Yes,
just
sir.
cheese stick wrappers all over the place. And it's like, so just, I'm the enforcer. So I'm in there, like the goalie, kicking them back into play, and my
Yep.
wife's there for the emotional aspect and that kind of thing. But we work well together. So um, they're currently going through the court system. And so eventually, if the parental rights get terminated, then we would have the ability to adopt them at that point. It takes forever. Uh,
Mm,
and you never know really if you're ready until all of a sudden you determine that you're ready. And if it ends up meaning we just hang on to them for a long period of time until they're adults, and they graduate out of the system, then that might be what it is. The only thing I've learned over the course of the career is that um, I've got so many rough edges and shortcomings as a parent, and foster kids kind of can point that out to you. But the patience that you learn over the long term is definitely there. Like I don't get excited real easy when my kids are
mm.
nuts. But that's probably taken years to get there, right?
How long have these kids been in your care? These current
This
ones?
one, these this set, they've been here since last October.
Okay.
And we've had spells where there hasn't been any. And like I said, my family dynamics are going to change. Like my daughter's an adult
Mm,
in college. She's probably a few years from, I mean, I don't know if she's going to be able to move out in this state, um,
right.
she's headed into adulthood, college, marriage, that kind of stuff. And so, we've got a full place right now, but in another couple of years, we'll be down, my oldest. And so it's just different. So we've had him probably for, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, something like that.
Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Again, I mean, honestly, like my hat's off to you, like genuinely, like there's the world needs people doing what you're doing, and I don't know if everybody could do it or would want to do it or could pull it off. So like I think it's very, very admirable.
Ah, thanks. The critics in my head don't tell me that, but we're doing what we can because we can, and it's a home that's a safe environment and in a pleasant environment, and we're just trying to get the boys to thrive in it, and they are. And however that turns out, we're hanging on loosely because you never know. Like a family member could step up, and the state's
Yeah, right. I mean,
focus is to always reunite with family, and so you kind of hang on loosely and love where you can, and just knowing that like each day's a new adventure. Some days are better than others.
I'm sure you hear some wild stories.
We do. Their stories aren't that crazy, but on their end of things, there was just some homelessness involved and some neglect and stuff like that, and some long absence from being in the public school system. And so they're not coming in with a whole lot of like physical abuse trauma and that kind of thing. It's more like neglect. And of course, there's just some gaps from an educational perspective because you haven't been in school in a few years.
Right. Wow. Wow. Let's yeah, again, it's fascinating. For our paths cross in real life for a cup of coffee. We could probably talked about that just for an hour. It's very interesting.
It is, and there's a huge need out there. And I think one of the craziest things for me to notice along the way is you would think everybody that gets into foster care is a set of an amazing people. Like they're just great. They're in it for the right reasons. They're not. Half
mm.
of them that are in it, at least half of them that are in it are just in it for other reasons, money, whatever. It's just foster care homes can be just as tough as the home they were in.
And that is I don't know what to call that you're saying, using the system and using the kids who are in need in that way. That's just pure evil.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of mind blowing. I'm like, wow, no way.
People are
But
crazy.
but it's just crazy. I mean, some people are good at things, other people are just terrible at other things. I'll give my wife most of the credit. She's the wheel that really makes all that turn. I ride her coattails, so most of the success that we have, um, she gets a lot of credit for. I support her up where I can, but she carries quite a bit of load being the mom and doing all the appointments and things that the
Right.
boys need keeping our house running. She's an amazing individual.
Man, well, you got so much going on. I can see why you want to prioritize your fitness. So I guess I guess kind of in summary or to wrap it up, could you tell me you're working out there in your garage, there's a whole lot of different avenues that you could have went. What led you to Linchpin? And I guess why have you decided to stay for so long?
Good question. I was on main site for a while, a couple years, and I just kind of got, I don't know, complacent, bored, something like that. It's a community and you can post and that kind of thing, but and one of my buddies who lives near me was like, you should check out CrossFit Linchpin. It's put out by Pat Sherwood, and this is, back in 2016. And I was like, who? At the time.
This knucklehead?
All right, all right, and actually, shout out to my buddy Rob. He's a CrossFit Linchpin member. He's R2 Fasani. He posts on
Yes.
Instagram. He's been on there for a while. And so funny thing about that is like because he's close, sometimes we'll get together and work out. So it was easy when we had that Linchpin
That's cool.
challenge to connect because he's literally like 450 meters from my house, something like that.
Nice. That's
Um,
awesome.
and he's like, you should check that out. And that was back when, I think there wasn't a private track at that point. It was
Wow.
just the logo was red at that point with the red
Yeah,
background, and it was on Instagram and I think your web page, and that was it.
that was
Um,
it. Yeah.
and what I liked about it also was it had a consistent time frame. So it was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, rest day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Main site was like 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. And so it cycles sometimes and it just made it harder from a family
Right.
perspective. The one with the fixed schedule just made it easier for me to be more consistent. And that's what I was looking for. Um, and that was back in the day, I think before you were married, and
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
stream live videos of you making ice cream.
Yep. Oh yeah, I still got the ice cream maker.
Right. So I think it was Fat Pat's Pints, right? Wasn't that
Yeah,
what it
man. Oh, that still lives on. I still my kids like me to make them ice cream every now and then.
that was awesome YouTube entertainment, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And then after that, the private track kind of grew up and birthed into different things. And so I joined on that. Main reason for that is I wanted a little bit more with the accessory and that
Mm.
kind of thing. And it was a smoking deal. It still is at that amount. And I wanted to kind of support all the effort that you were putting into the fitness community. I mean, because for the longest time it was like, yeah, this is just free. There's no
Mm.
paywalls or nothing like that. And I was like, you know what? I can handle $10 a month. Like I need to support, the cause and what he's doing out there. And then of course now it's like the community is huge um, and there's all the different tracks you can take and it's super advantageous. I mean,
Certainly has evolved.
yeah, and like I said, I'll still hit up the limited equipment option from time to time because it's
Yeah,
for you.
yeah.
It scratches a certain itch too, and when I'm up at the cabin, I'll do the no equipment option, up at altitude, and that's not easy because I'm down at sea level. So,
Hmm.
but the flexibility is what keeps me around. I could post more on the private group and that kind of thing. It's just
Don't worry about posting.
well, I mean, I'm kind of
Live your
like in the
life.
back row watching, right? And liking, and so I'm participating, but and I'll comment on something if I feel like I have some ground to stand on. But I feel like there's so many more people out there that can articulate things better than I can. Or they've already said it, and I'm like, that, well, that's exactly how I would
Yeah,
say
sure.
it.
We got some
Um,
sharp people in there.
yeah, so that's what keeps me around. And it's been a fun journey for me. I mean, the programming's been largely the same most of the way, you know.
Hmm.
Um, there were some crazy workouts back in the day that on the Instagram that would post, and I'm like, what?
What was this?
What is this madness? Like go drag your sled for a mile or something
Oh
like
yeah, oh yeah.
and stuff like that. And so those things come around occasionally, but I think those were a little bit more um, on the gram back then. But even in the Instagram, there's not much of us that post there anymore. I'm kind of hanging
Hmm.
on to it because that's where I started posting. So I think there's like half a dozen of us that post on there. Most
Yeah.
people are in squads or on the Facebook,
Yeah,
private,
you're right. It's
that
the
kind of thing.
majority of the action is in the squads feature and the Linchpin and the BTWB app, and then in the private Facebook group.
Yeah. So that's
Yep.
kind of what's kept me around, and it's always challenging enough. It was interesting when the wild card option came out, because that's how I used to scale most
Oh,
of the time
good.
something would come up and I would always be like, if it was 135 for the men, 95 for the women, I would pick 115.
Yep.
Just because that
It's
felt
super
like,
popular option.
no, it's a gross option, but uh,
Fair point.
but it was one that like, okay, I can move this, keep the intensity where I feel it needs to be. 135 is just going to take me too long, and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, cool, like that's right up my alley. So I ride the wild card train a while, but if we do something that's long and light, I'll RX that and those kinds of things. But yeah, that's what's kept me around. It's constantly varied, right? Which I like, and it's as intense as you want it to be. And some days I feel like pushing the gas. Other days, the not for time has been good. Like today, not for time. I
Yep.
specifically choose those days to go not for time because it's good mentally.
I completely agree, and I also chose the not for time today as well because that's you just can't burn it down every day. But man, I tell you what, Scott, genuinely appreciate you sharing your story. Appreciate you being a part of Lynchpin and giving me a little bit of time today and everybody else to kind of hear what you're about.
Yeah, hopefully they enjoy it. But I'm out here on the West Coast, so I'm a late poster,
It's
coming in at
it's
the tail end of
all
things.
it's all good, man. Well, hey, again, and also hats off to you for the foster kids. You know, tell your wife I think that's profoundly admirable as well. And I will see you either in the Lynchpin Squad, the BTWB app, or I'll see you in the Facebook group.
Sounds good. Thanks for
All right,
having me,
man.
Todd. I appreciate
Later.
it. Have a good afternoon.